Hello, everyone. Welcome to Zen and Fanfics. Today we are featuring What If Genius Deku had system quirk with rewards and punishments? The story is written by lollyme on fanfiction.net. Before we start, please like and subscribe for more content. Now let's dive into the story. Izuku was 4 when he first saw the blue screen in front of him. On it, words appeared. He was confused, but fascinated. Then, when the words were fully shown, he figured out that this was his quirk and grew very excited. He eagerly read what was on the screen and wrote it down to remember. When he had finished, it disappeared, and a snake appeared where it had been, falling onto his head and winding around his small shoulders. He was planning on getting his mother to read what he had copied from the screen, since he couldn't read it all since he had just started to learn how to read and write at daycare. The snake was orangish in color, with tan lines outlined in black on its body. It slithered on his shoulders and moved its head to his ear before slightly hissing as it spoke to him. "I'm System, your quirk. I'll be explaining how I work and helping you as we go. I will give you a task. It will appear before you on a blue screen with a time limit. You must complete that task before the time runs out, and you will get a reward. If you do not complete the task in time, you will get punished. The punishment will be varied in intensity as you grow. So if you are punished now, it shall be small as you are still a child. You may ask for my help at any time. I will be with you always. Understand." The snake was now in front of him, while his head was. He was still around Izuku's shoulders. Izuku was silent while System spoke, watching it in amazement and wonder. At having System direct a question at him, he blinked and eagerly nodded. The System deemed it a good enough answer and continued speaking, ironically talking with perfect pronunciation, being in the form of a snake. "Good. I'll tell you what the screen said, and you will complete the task and get a reward after." The screen said, "You have gained your quirk. Go tell your mother it is called System and gives you tasks to complete with time limits. You get rewards or punishments depending on completion of the task in time. After telling her, you shall get your first reward. Your time limit is 30 minutes. You must go tell your mother now. You have only got 20 minutes left." And then System settled on his shoulders as Izuku ran off with his little notebook. When he got to his mother, he was so excited he started rambling as soon as he got there. She giggled and nodded along, doing her best to listen as he told her everything that happened as fast as he could. She got most of it, but some of it was said a little too fast. She understood he had gotten his quirk, what it was called, and the snake appeared. Seeing his little notebook open, and having it handed to her, she read what he had copied as well. While this was going on, another blue screen appeared, and he looked at it eagerly as System hissed what it said to him again. This time, his mother heard it as well. This one says, "Congratulations, you have completed your first task. Your reward is advanced reading skills and comprehension. You will now be able to read beyond your level, so the System doesn't have to read everything to you anymore. It will take effect in 5 minutes. This is great. I was getting tired of reading it aloud already." System then slithered under his shirt and curled around him, going to sleep. He wiggled a bit and giggled as it tickled him. He and his mother were very excited at his new quirk, and she wanted to get her purse to get it registered. Inko Midoriya was very happy for her son, but when he had initially run up to her with a snake around his shoulders, she was a bit worried. It was a relief to find out it was his quirk. She grabbed her purse and small coat, grabbing one for Izuku as well before going to get him and leave. This would be a new quirk in the family, since she had minor telekinesis and Hisashi had a fire-breathing quirk. It could be passed down from Hisashi's side, but she wouldn't know and couldn't ask him. He had walked out almost a year after Izuku had been born, telling her of a job in America, promising to call and send letters and money. It was fine for a few. Then he had abruptly stopped calling and sending letters, but she still got money from him. Not long after she had filed for a divorce, and he had to pay child support monthly. Of course, she would have to tell the doctor who has to verify her son's quirk, as is the law. The drive was filled with Izuku excited chatter and the gentle beat to the radio on low. The System is asleep around Izuku's stomach, well, trying to at least. The kid keeps shifting around and wiggling in his excitement. The System was getting annoyed, but refrained because it is a literal child. As they pulled up to the doctor's office, which doubles as a quirk registry building, Inko had Izuku put on his coat and grab his little backpack. It was, of course, All Might themed. She grabbed his little hand, and they walked inside the glass door on the left of the building. The sign above it said Quirk Registry. Izuku was bouncing as he walked, and the receptionist that greeted them laughed a bit at the sight. "I see he's excited, huh? Your Quirk must have come in, huh, little one?" She smiled at him, and he nodded excitedly again, bouncing up and down where he stood. The lady reached into a drawer in her desk and pulled out a small lollipop, handing it to Izuku as his mother gestured for him to go sit down on a chair near her. He happily took the candy and did so, taking the wrapper off and putting it inside his pocket as he sat down and enjoyed his lollipop. Inko got the paperwork needed to see the Quirk doctor, sat down by her son as she filled it out. She had a sense of foreboding, however, as she remembered something the system had said, as she was filling out what they knew about his Quirk so far. The system said something about getting punished if he didn't complete a task in time. She just hoped it wasn't bad, and that Izuku always did the tasks in time, so they wouldn't have to find out. As she finished the paperwork and stood up to turn it in, the system popped back out and wrapped around Izuku's shoulders again. She had to admit, it would take a bit for her to get used to the fact the system had appeared as a snake. She hoped it was actually non-venomous. Could it have venom, since it was just the physical appearance of his Quirk? She handed in the paperwork and went back to her son. He was trying not to move around as much so the system wouldn't accidentally fall. She had to hide a small giggle behind her hand as she watched this, trying to not break his concentration. After about 15 minutes or so, they were called back and guided to the doctor's office. The Quirk doctor was short, with a bushy gray mustache, goggles over his eyes, and he was bald. He beckoned them over and had them sit down. The system kept an eye on the doctor, she noted as the appointment went on. He had them describe the Quirk, what it appeared like, and what they knew about how it functioned. As he stood up to get the x-ray machine set up, needing to get an x-ray of Izuku's foot. If he had an extra pinky toe joint and no sign of a Quirk, then he would have been declared Quirkless. But if he had one and still had a Quirk, it would be declared a genetic mutation and looked over. There are other, more concrete ways to tell if a person is missing the Quirk factor, but this one was used when they first appeared over 100 years ago. The system slithered over to her and spoke quietly. "I don't have a good feeling about that, doctor. He has a bad aura around him, like he is connected to something very bad." System slithered back to Izuku as she processed what it said. She had gotten a weird feeling about the man as well, so she would keep an eye on him around Izuku. As they looked at the x-ray and noted that Izuku had the extra toe joint, the doctor made a comment about this not happening often. Quirk people now tended to not have the extra joint, but it wasn't unheard of. The doctor had an odd edge to his voice as he spoke, though. It made her slightly uneasy. It was like he was excited about something she didn't know. It unsettled her, and she couldn't wait to get away from the man. As the appointment came to a close, they got Izuku to name his Quirk. He named it System, since that is what the snake system had called itself. As they left, she felt like they were being watched, and she shivered slightly. She would ask Izuku about changing his doctor later. Right now, they were going to get ice cream and celebrate by making katsudan for dinner. In a warehouse full of incubated test subjects, hooked up to different machines to keep him alive, all for one would have smiled. That is, if his face was discernible. The doctor, a villain working for him, had just informed him of a little boy's Quirk. It seemed interesting and worth keeping an eye on. Maybe it would prove beneficial to him, and he would find the boy and take it for himself. It had been a year since his injuries, and maybe it could help heal him in a sense. This reward system seemed intriguing and could give out anything. As it is, he cackled, which didn't help his healing lungs nor his damaged throat. He ended up coughing for a while after. Never mind that. He will keep an eye on this boy's development and see for himself if it would be worth taking for himself. When Izuku was 5, he and Kakin, Bakugo Katsuki, had a falling out of sorts. It was also the first time he had been punished by his Quirk. It was very unpleasant all around. He lost his best friend and failed a task for the first time on the same day. He was just lucky to have gotten home when it had started. He was following Bakugo and some other kids walking on a fallen tree over a stream. A blue screen appeared right before Bakugo fell, telling him to go down there and help him up, make sure he was okay. Naturally, he was happy. This was his friend, and friends help each other. This was only natural. Bakugo thought otherwise, and he had rejected his help. He stood up on his own and was saying something, but Izuku had tuned him out, staring at the blue screen that had appeared in front of him after his help was rejected. The screen told him he was going to be punished for failing the task in the next 10 minutes. He was confused and scarred. This would be his first punishment by his quirk, and he didn't know what to expect. He started to run home, ignoring the other kids as they called out for him. He just knew he needed to get home soon before it happened. He was out of breath when he reached his door, and had just made it inside when System slithered off of him and in front of him. "Kid, the punishment is starting now," was all the warning he got before he was assaulted by painful volts of electricity shooting up and down his whole body. If he could move and look down, he would see electricity crackling over his body as it shocked him. As it was, he was curled up in a ball, clutching his legs to his chest as he sobbed. Tears were running down his face and soaking his shirt already. Midoriya tended to cry a lot. This was what made Inko come running into the room, having been in the kitchen making herself a cup of coffee. She arrived to the image of her baby on the ground, crying his eyes out as he was electrocuted for a full minute. When it had ended shortly after her arrival, she was kneeling beside her unconscious child and cradling him to her chest. System slithered up onto her and around her shoulders, watching Izuku. Contrary to popular belief, System did very much care for Izuku, as it was always with the boy and became his closest friend in spite of their connection. Seeing the boy in distress like this was not something they wanted to see again, and vowed to do what they could to help him complete his tasks. Inko scooped up her son and grabbed her purse, leaving the apartment in a rush, coffee forgotten and growing cold. She drove as fast as she dared to the hospital, wanting Izuku checked out and making sure he would be all right. She wasn't sure what had happened, but she was still shocked about what she had seen. The image of Izuku being electrocuted was going to be in her mind for a long time after this day. When they got to the hospital, they were taken back quickly as she hurriedly explained what happened. The checkup was quick, and they said he would be in a state of shock when he woke up. He would be sore, and they said he should be on bed rest for a day or two just to be on the safe side. As they exited the hospital, Inko was finally able to breathe properly again. Her baby would be okay, sore, but okay. She would find out what exactly happened when he woke up, but before that she needed to get home and make something easy to eat for dinner. She didn't want Izuku to go hungry because he didn't have the energy to properly eat his food. When Izuku woke up, his whole body hurt. A few hours had passed, and it was well past midnight. System was curled up on his stomach, and his mother had fallen asleep beside his bed in the computer chair. She had pulled it into his room to stay with him until he woke up. Izuku opened his eyes blurrily. He tried to move his arms to wipe his eyes, but groaned and stayed still. Moving sent jolts of pain coursing through his arms to his shoulders. Hearing him, Inko stirred and woke up as well. Seeing her son awake, she quickly got closer to him and grabbed his hand. "Sweetie, do you remember what happened? I was worried sick. Here, let me get you some soup and some more pillows. I'll be right back." Her voice was a bit rushed, frantic with worry as she smoothed his hair back and kissed the crown of his head. System slithered up to him as she left his room. "Glad to see you awake, kid. You really scared us." System moved and curled up on his stomach. Izuku was glad that it was over, but he really wished it never happened. He had just experienced his quirk drawback, like every other quirk user had. If he failed a task given to him, he would be punished via electricity. Maybe it would vary as well, throw in some other form of punishment. He didn't want to find out anyway. He tried to wiggle his fingers and toes, hoping to lessen the pain and be able to sit up. As he did this, a blue screen appeared before him. Your new task is to start a notebook analyzing quirks. This will help you in the future. Your time limit is 3 days. System read the screen as well, and seemed to find the limit acceptable, seeing as he was still recovering from being electrocuted. Izuku was just happy he had 3 days to complete this task. He was also kind of excited to study and analyze quirks. He already found them very interesting. He could start with his mother's quirk, and then he could draw her, and she'd be super proud of him. "Kid, When your mom gets back, we gotta let her know about your new task, and she could help, all right? System asked. Well, it was more like he was giving Izuku an option, but knowing he'd agree anyway. Izuku just nodded along anyway. He was already going to tell her cause he needed to ask about her quirk anyway. They both looked up as Inko walked back in with a soup mug in her hands. Placing it on the bedside table, she takes a seat again. Here, sweetie, I warmed up some chicken noodle soup for you. She held the cup out for him to grab. He took the mug from her and held it in both hands, close to his chest. Clearing her throat, she spoke again. Now, sweetie, can you tell us what happened? She looked at him worriedly as she asked. He tipped the mug and drank some of the soup, chewing the little pieces and swallowing. Looking back up at her, he began telling them what had happened. I was with Kakin and the others. We were walking through the woods and going over a stream, walking on a big log. A blue screen appeared telling me to go help Kakin, right before he fell into the stream. So I went down there to help him up, like friends do, right? He refused, and then another screen appeared saying, I had 10 minutes before I was going to be punished and I ran home. He finished his explanation a bit fast, taking a big gulp of air when he had finished. Inko leaned forward to hug her son, careful of the mug still clutched in his small hands. Carting her hand through his hair, she murmured reassurances to him. I think that the tasks can be influenced by other things. Izuku was crying a bit as he said this, comforted by his mother's embrace. Inko just nodded and continued to soothe her child. We'll just have to do our best then, won't we? She stated, letting go of him. She took the mug so it wouldn't spill. Setting it aside, she moved to sit on the bed with him. Pulling him back into her arms, now cuddling with him in her lap, she continued to run her hands through his hair. System spoke up, seeing as the kid had forgotten, and informed Inko. The kid's got to get a notebook, and he needs to start learning more about quirks to analyze them. He's got 3 days, and I know this can be completed in the time limit. Inko nodded and made plans to take Izuku to the store so he could pick out everything he wanted for this new task he was given. In a warehouse, different than the last, still hooked up to different tubes, All for One was in deep thought. It seems that this quirk could also hurt the user if they failed to complete a task. It was all so intriguing. He told the boy's watchers, criminals loyal to him, to take notes on everything they could about the boy. He might come in handy in the future. Now, if only he could take this for himself with no punishment. It would be a great addition to his collection, and maybe it could have helped him heal. But alas, he didn't want to be shocked. The boy would just have to become one of his pawns. He just needs to be patient and let the boy grow up some, see how the quirk will evolve as he gets older, and see if it's worth taking for himself later on. When Izuku went to middle school at Aldera Junior High, his peers liked to push him around. The social hierarchy they followed was based on strength, so he was seen as the weakest. They found his quirk unuseful and liked to make fun of him for it, but some of theirs were just weird, like the extended neck guy. It extended, but it was crooked. They followed Bakugo's lead, seeing him as the strongest for his flashy explosion quirk. Izuku was 11, almost 12, and he'd completed multiple tasks, having failed a total of 3 since that first time at 5. He's been rewarded with expensive notebooks, hero merch, and information so far. He was even rewarded a code to use for his analysis notebook when he completed a task at 9. So now nobody could read his notes, and he started to write down every piece of information that he was rewarded with. The police force knew him by name now, and they know his quirk as well, so when he came by with his mother to share information they thought relevant for the law enforcement, they accepted it and thanked them. This came in handy many times, since the rewarded information was mostly about future crimes. Sometimes he'd be given information about heroes and their personal lives, as well as some patrol routes. His notebooks have evolved, and he has been tasked on many occasions to write analysis on heroes and villains, sometimes even random people. For those, he had to observe and guess, which greatly helped him with information gathering and subtlety. He has over 20 notebooks. Since he gets tasks every day, the amount varies, and the favorite task seems to be analysis. The middle school experience was weird, as Izuku has long given up on friends. He just does his tasks to the best of his ability and goes on with his day. Though one of the tasks in his first week of school had him get a teacher fired, which required gathering information, he finally put his amateur hacking skills to use and send the evidence to the principal anonymously. Honestly, not that bad, and he didn't get caught. He gave up his dream of being a hero, not finding them to be everything he had hoped, especially Endeavor, and now aspired to be a Quirk analyst. He'd looked up types of analysts, wanted to see where he'd like to go, and decided to be a Quirk analyst for the heroes. The added bonus of this job, paying quite well, was also a factor, as analysts who were good enough to work with heroes were rare. He knows his mother is also happy about this SWCH in career choices, and tries his best to stay safe as he completes tasks. He hates being punished. The last time he'd been shocked left Lichtenberg scars on his back. The blue screen alerting him with a task popped up as he was walking. He had to stop and move to the side so he wouldn't be in the way. He walked to a bus stop and sat down, holding his yellow backpack in his lap. Looking up, he felt system moving up and around his neck as well. Your new task is to go to the address provided and break in from the window. Do this without alerting the resident of your presence until they enter the room and see you on their couch. Address is XX Apartment XXX on the top floor. Your time limit is the rest of the day. Izuku was going to jail today. He was sure of it. Not only was this breaking and entering, which is illegal, but this is Eraserheads' home he was supposed to break into. System was insane, completely insane, and he was going to go to jail and never see his mom again. System curled up around his neck, rubbing his head against his left cheek to calm him down. It's all right, kid. Just use those skills you've got for your other tasks. You've got this, you're smart, and you've got me. System told him, alleviating some of his anxieties and giving him a little boost in confidence. Nodding, Izuku stood up. Breathing in, he put his backpack on his shoulders and started to walk following the directions of System. He's totally got this. He can do this. He's just got to believe in himself. What was he thinking? He does not got this. He has no confidence in himself. He's going to fail. Izuku was internally freaking out. He was now outside of Eraserhead's apartment on the top floor, looking into the window and using bobby pins to pick the lock. His hands were shaking, and he was sure he was going to get caught. He's just glad he had to learn lockpicking for a task a while back. System was keeping a lookout, peeking over his shoulder and looking into the apartment to make sure nobody was in there. He was also kind of surprised the kid wasn't freaking out. More, since he was technically doing something illegal and all. They both heard a click as the lock opened. Looking up, they made eye contact and then slowly opened the window. They were careful to be as quiet as possible and crept inside, letting out a breath. Izuku closed the window as softly as possible and crept over to the couch. Sitting down, he opened his bag and got out his notebook, needing to do something so he wouldn't fidget. He was cursing out the system in his head for making him do this. He was just 11, too young for jail. He started to finish his analysis for Metalhead, a new villain. As he was finishing up the last sentence, he heard quiet footsteps coming their way. Anxiety crawled up his throat, and he had to hold his breath to not make a sound. System looked up as well. They both watched as a man, tall, maybe 6 feet 0 inches, Izuku's mind whispered, pale, very tired looking and wearing sweats and a black t-shirt, walked into the room. The man stopped upon seeing them, eyes widening a bit as he held his cup of coffee tighter. Suddenly a blue screen appeared in front of Izuku, and he broke eye contact with, no doubt, Eraserhead to look at it. Congratulations, you have completed this task. Your reward is surprise. This power gives the user a random item that will be of use at later times. It can be a gun, flash drive with anything on it, or an envelope with some type of information written inside. The drawback is that the user will have no control of it, so it can activate at random times. It also uses the user's energy to generate the items. That was pretty cool. Now, about Eraserhead standing there, Izuku looked back at him and saw he was now glaring. A green light then came from above Izuku, and when he looked up, a flash drive fell on his face. He blinked, holding the place it had hit, and grabbed it. Looking back at Eraserhead, he saw the man lose his glare and just pinch his nose. Izuku quietly thought he looked like a tired and annoyed parent. So, Izuku started talking, finding the staring and silence very awkward. I'm sorry about this. He apologized. I'm Izuku Midoriya. Please don't arrest me. My quirk made me do it. He said. It sounded lame to him, but he didn't know what else to say. Izawa Shoda, also known as the pro-hero Eraserhead, was having a relatively good day. Being a teacher and hero was very stressful, and he had an off day today. He had just gotten himself a cup of coffee and was going to the living room to watch the news. He stopped dead, wondering what he'd done to have a child sitting on his couch. He tightened his hand around his cup, glaring at the child as they started back. He watched in silence as a green light appeared above the boy, and watched as a flash drive fell from it, hitting him above his left eye. He pinched the bridge of his nose as he saw the boy hold the spot, then grabbed the flash drive. He watched bemused as the kid talked. So, the kid started talking, "I'm sorry about this." He apologized. "I'm Izuku Midoriya. Please don't arrest me. My quirk made me do it," he said. Shoto was unimpressed and took a sip of his coffee. He was too tired for this SHD sighing. He walked over to the recliner, sitting down and facing the kid. He started to talk. "Kid, you're not going to jail. Just tell how you got here, why you came, and why that flash drive just fell on your face." Taking a big gulp of coffee, he wished Hizashi was here. The voice hero was better with kids than him. "I'm here because my quirk told me to come here, sir," the kid said while Midoriya. He was clearly nervous, and he didn't seem to be lying either. "My quirk is called System. I picked the lock on your window." The kid finished sheepishly. Shota had to give the kid some credit. This was pretty impressive as he lives on the top floor, and the lock was one of the newer models. "All right, I believe you. Now, I'm Izawa Shota. This is my apartment, which I'm guessing you already knew. Why'd that flash drive fall on your face?" Shota was curious. He needed to look the kid up later and see about that quirk of his. The kid's eyes widened a bit, looking at the flash drive again. "My quirk is task-oriented, so when I complete a task in the time given, I'm rewarded, and if I don't, I'm punished. The reward was a new power called Surprise, and I'm pretty sure it gave me this flash drive. There must be something on it. I wish I had my laptop, then I could plug it in and see." Then the kid, Midoriya, Shota, reminded himself again, devolved into incoherent muttering. Shota cursed his luck and then chugged his coffee. He set the cup down and stood up. "All right, kid, let's see what's on that thing." He was curious as well. Plus, Midoriya didn't seem to be lying. He just knew this kid was going to be a problem child. He beckoned Midoriya to follow him as they went to his office and grabbed his laptop. He opened the laptop, typed his password in out of Midoriya's vision, and held his hand out for the flash drive. Midoriya stood there for a minute, seeming to be in a bit of shock, before handing him the flash drive. He plugged it in, opening the files, and moving to the side a bit so Midoriya could see as well. As they looked at the files, their eyes widened. This was concerning indeed. Izuku was very shocked. First of all, he's not in trouble. Second, he got a new power as a reward, albeit it might get concerning later on knowing the description that System gave for it. Now Eraserhead, Izawa-san, was letting him use his laptop to look at the flash drive his new power had given him. He followed Izawa-san to his home office and stopped in front of his desk. He watched as he opened his computer and typed something before holding his hand out. It took an embarrassing amount of time for Izuku to remember he was holding the flash drive and handed it to him. He was excited and nervous to see what was on it. He moved to the other side of the desk, standing beside Izawa-san as the man opened the files. His eyes widened at what they both saw. He was sure Izawa-san was shocked too. On the screen were multiple files with pictures of him, along with pages of notes and messages. It seems his quirk has just given them evidence he was being stalked. He got the creeps at some of these, detailing his physique, what needed improvement, and what was considered tolerable. He moved his hand, moving the pointer and clicking on one of the files full of notes. Target: Izuku Midoriya Quirk. System about Quirk. System is a task-oriented quirk, seeming to appear as a blue screen in front of the user's face. This also appears to happen at random. The task varies from what we have gathered. It could be helping someone cross the street to getting someone fired. We have witnessed as he has completed these tasks, getting rewards that vary from notebooks to hero merch to envelopes with notes inside. It is unknown what is inside, but we have witnessed the family go to the police quite a few times, so we conclude it must be something valuable, most likely information. Failure to complete a task results in a punishment, So far it has been getting shocked by electricity. We do not know the voltage, nor do we know if this leaves any marks. Part of system takes the form of a sentient snake, milk snake, burnt-ish orange with tan lines in black, and stays on the target. Age, 6th birthday, July 15th family. Inko Midoriya, mother. Hisashi Midoriya, father, USA. Parents are divorced. Insert picture of Izuku at school. Insert picture of Izuku in his room. Notes. The target seems to be incredibly smart for his age. Single mother, works as a lawyer, does most of her work from her office at her apartment. They live in apartment XX on XXXXX Street. Izuku felt like he couldn't breathe. They knew where he lived? Oh God. What about his mother? She was in danger. Oh my God, they were being targeted by someone. As Izuku's thoughts spiraled, his breathing increased until he was gasping for air. Trapped in his mind, he couldn't pay attention to his surroundings. He felt a hand shaking his shoulder. He looked at it. Slowly he looked up, squinting. He saw the slightly blurry face of Aizawa-san. The man's mouth was moving, but he couldn't make out what the man was saying. He shook his head, moving his hands to cover his ears in a futile attempt to listen. His fingers felt numb. He distantly noticed as Aizawa-san took one of his hands and placed it on his chest. Izuku could feel the man's heartbeat, a steady rhythm. He felt him take deep breaths, and Izuku tried to copy him. His gasping breath slowly started to slow, and he placed his other hand over his own heart, beating frantically. He noticed a ringing in his ears. It was getting quieter as he could hear Aizawa-san distantly. He was saying something. Izuku thinks the man is coaching him, getting him to breathe and calm down. He took a few more deep breaths, calming down more. His heart felt steadier, and he could finally hear again. His breathing was still sharp, but it was also acceptable. He wondered when they had gotten on the floor. He moved both of his hands to fold on his lap. Looking up, he caught Aizawa-san's eyes and wondered what the man must be thinking. This random kid broke into his apartment, watched a flash drive fall in a said kid's face from a newly gained power the kid got, and then helped the kid through a panic attack after realizing he has been stalked for years. Yeah, Izuku couldn't really believe any of this happened, but here was the proof. Shota watched the kid in front of him concerned. Kid, Midoriya, you with me? Shota questioned. Midoriya nodded, and Shota felt relieved he was back and not panicking anymore. Good. This needs to be given to the pros, and we'll find somewhere safe for you and your mother. Okay, I need you to agree. Then we'll take the flash drive and go get your mother. Shota stated. He was making sure to keep eye contact, conveying how serious this was and the urgency that they do this now. Okay, Aizawa-san, Midoriya muttered. His voice was kind of hoarse, and he mentally added to get the kid a water bottle as they left. He stood up, helping Midoriya up as well, and took out the flash drive. He started to walk to the living room, grabbing the kid's bag and putting the flash drive in the front pocket. He took the hairband from his wrist, putting his tangled black hair into a bun and making sure the kid was following. Kid, you're going to have to give me directions to your apartment. We can get your mother and anything you think relevant to take with you and go to UA. I'm going to give the flash drive to Nizu, and then we'll find a place for you and your mother. He turned to look at Midoriya as he said this, making a detour to the kitchen to grab water from his fridge. Yes, sir. We live on XXXX Street, XXXXX Apartments, number XX. Midoriya grabbed the water bottle Shota handed him. He led Midoriya out of his door and down to the garage. He walked to his car, a black Honda Accord, and got into the driver's seat. Midoriya got into the front passenger seat. He started the car and pulled out. Midoriya gave directions when needed, and they eventually got to his apartment. He followed Midoriya up to his apartment and waited behind him as he knocked on the door. He heard steady footsteps and watched as a woman with long green hair put into a half-up style, wearing a suit and skirt with small heels on opening the door. Her eyes were green like her son's, and she looked between them. Inko was a strong woman. Being a lawyer in the age of heroes and villains meant she'd need to be tough. Regardless of how strong she was, and how tough her mind had grown, she was not prepared to hear that her son was being stalked, and by proxy, herself. She had let them both inside. Izuku, introducing them both while he went to his room. She had led Aizawa-san to the living room, sitting down on the couch as he sat in the armchair. Ms. Midoriya, I'm aware this is a lot to take in a short amount of time, but if you come with me to UA, we will have a hero investigating this, and we will ensure you and your son's safety. Aizawa-san told her. She brought her hands to her head, feeling a headache starting to form as her mind whirled with all of the possibilities and what-if scenarios. All right, we'll go with you. Let me go get my stuff, and we can go. I assume Izuku is already grabbing the things he'll need. Inko stated more than asked. She stood up, walking towards her office to gather everything for her job. She didn't know when they'd be safe to return home, and she didn't want to lose her job during that time. Grabbing her laptop first, she put that in her tote bag. She paired that with her folders, 2 binders, and her charger. She put in her pencil case with her stationery items she'd need. Next, she went to her room. Opening the closet, she got out 2 more suits. They had skirts with them, not pants. She liked wearing skirts more, another pair of heels, and her tennis shoes. She went to her dresser last, getting 2 pairs of comfortable clothing, putting them into her bag, and zipping it up. Walking out of her room, she shut the door, turning to the left of it and going to Izuku's room. She opened the door to check on him, and saw him putting all of his notebooks into his backpack. He had his clothes in a bag, and his laptop and current notebook, plus stationery in his satchel as well. "Sweetie, are you done?" she questioned, raising an eyebrow as she watched him with a small smile on her lips. He perks up, setting his backpack on his bed and looking at her. "I just finished, Mom." He bounced on his feet as he spoke, nervous energy rolling off of him. It was understandable. He is the main focus of this stalker. Oh, just thinking about it worsens her anxiety. Her baby had just started middle school this week, and now he's going to have to leave for an indiscernible amount of time. Her smile slipped off her face as she turned away from him, going back to her room to grab her bags. She walked back into the living room. She set her bags on the floor by the couch, turning to Aizawa-san again. She had a small frown on her face as she wrapped her arms around her stomach. "I'm sorry, Aizawa-san. Would you like something to drink while we get the last of our things?" Inko asked. "No thanks, Ms. Midoriya," Aizawa-san replied. She looked up at him and nodded before going to the kitchen to grab her container of Blue Moon tea. It's a special blend from this quaint little tea shop in a refillable dark blue container. She originally got it to try for cramps, which is what the tea was advertised to help with. Now she gets it for the flavor, and the more medicinal use is a bonus. She put in a grocery bag, adding the tea bags as well. She walked over to the over-counter cabinet and grabbed out her small tea set. It was a gift from her friend, Mitsuki Bakugo. It was a mint green with dark green accents. It had 3 teacups with saucers, a teapot, and it came with a little spoon to stir the tea with. She had loved it, and did cry upon receiving it for her birthday the year she had Izuku. She set those on the counter and opened the bottom cabinet to grab out the little case it had come in. It was a brown suitcase-style container, and she set each piece inside as they had been gifted to her. She walked back into the living room to set the bags down when Izuku walked into the room wearing his yellow backpack and holding his clothing bag, his satchel around him as well. She put her things together and watched as he set the bag down, sitting on the couch beside Aizawa-san and holding his backpack in his lap. "Sweetie, are you finished?" Inko questioned, standing up straighter as she looked over what he was bringing. He shook his head yes, hugging his backpack to his chest. He was quieter than usual, but she couldn't blame him. She turned her attention to Aizawa-san. "I believe that we are ready to go now, Aizawa-san. I believe I should also thank you for helping us." Inko Midoriya is a strong woman, but she was also a single mother, and she would do anything to keep her son safe. She was going to make sure whoever was stalking her son was arrested, and everyone involved as well. "I'll help grab your things, Ms. Midoriya. My boss, Nizu, has been notified to expect guests at UA today as well." Aizawa-san stood up and grabbed the 2 bags she handed over. Looking around, she realized she needed to make sure that all of the lights were off. Walking quickly, she went around each room, opening doors and cutting off potential fire hazards and lights. She walked back out to the living room, noticing that Aizawa-san had gone. Her other bags were gone as well, and Izuku was waiting for her. She walked over to him, holding her hand out and grabbing his free hand. They walked out of their apartment and went to Aizawa-san's car. All for One was listening to the doctor explain the complications and setbacks for the Nomu, only having one successful as of yet. They had given him the name Kurojiri and had him watch the brat, Shimuratenko, or as he was now called, Shigaraki Tamura. He was a special case, as they have yet to replicate how they had made him. The report was cut short when a ringtone was heard. The doctor looked over towards the burner phone on the table in front of him. All for One gestured for him to pick it up and answer, rather annoyed now as his plans were set back again. "Hello." The doctor's voice was gruff, yet no emotion was present. Upon hearing what the person on the other side had to say, he looked rather mad. As he hung up the phone, he balled his hands into fists. "The villain in charge of watching the kid just called to inform us that he just went into the UA school grounds. We have no way of getting inside, nor gathering any more information on him while he is there, and we don't know when he will be leaving. He said the kid had bags, like he was spending the night or going on a trip, and his mother and another man were seen entering with him. All for One would have thrown something if he could. As it was, he was still bound to a chair and relying on machinery to keep him alive. This kid was proving to be trouble. The villain they had followed him had lost him numerous times, and he somehow crossed paths with the heroes when they were planning on making a move to recruit him to their side. The news that he was now in the school grounds of a hero school was a massive setback to getting him or his power. He tried to take a deep breath to calm down and renew his plans for this kid, but he ended up choking on the tube down his throat. The doctor had to rush to his side and pull it out a bit from where he had lodged it down his throat. He was now in even more pain and angrier than he had started the day as. He cursed the hero society and the DMN useless villains he had following the kid. Izuku was very much scared. Somebody was essentially stalking him for a long time, and the only reason they found out was because he had gotten a power as a reward for breaking into Eraserheads' home. His life was a mess, and he blamed the system. The shock had slightly worn off when he had gotten to his home and packed his things. Now he was a mess of nervous energy and tangled thoughts as they drove to to see Principal Nizu. If he was in his normal state of mind, he would be freaking out because he was meeting Nizu. System was a reassuring weight around his neck. At least his Quirk looks out for him, mostly. He really does hate the punishment system. The reward are nice, though, like how he was awarded a new power. That reminds him. He turned to his backpack, grabbing out the notebook that read Spanish practice. Of course, it wasn't actually used for Spanish, but notes on his Quirk written in his own code. He had been keeping it since he was little and wrote down everything about his Quirk, like how it works, the punishments, and the rewards. He kept track of it all, as well as the tasks he had been asked to do. He got out his pen and started to write down what had happened today. It was a bit calming and helped with his thoughts as well. Since he's used to this, it comforts him. Aizawa glanced back at the kid as he drove to you, worried about how he was doing now. He felt a bit relieved when he saw the kid writing in a notebook and brought his eyes back to the road. His mind was going over different scenarios of what could happen, or, more precisely, what this kid's future might be, and that thought was mildly worrying. A stray thought flew through his mind then. This kid, Midoriya, was ridiculously smart, he could tell. What would happen when Nizu realizes this? This could be a potential pair that could take over the world. Well, the kid deserves something to look forward to after all of this. Maybe it won't be that bad. Who was he trying to kid? This was going to give him gray hairs later. He could just feel it. Letting out a sigh, he glanced over to Ms. Midoriya. It was clear she was worried for her son, and it showed in the way she was wringing her hands in her lap and slightly tapping her left foot on the floor of the car. He wasn't much of a people person. That was more Hisashi domain. He was awkward at best, and he wasn't quite sure how to try and calm some of her worries. Letting out a small sigh, he took a left and continued down the road, taking side roads to avoid the busier streets to get to you. Nizu was sitting in his office working on his current project. Yes, we'll say project, as he was planning the downfall of human society and how he would reform everything. Yes, he could definitely abolish those imbeciles in the commission. That would be very cathartic, yet also benefit society as a whole. As it stands, he was merely sipping a cup of tea while sitting at his desk, cackling at times at his thoughts, scaring those who happened to walk by his office. He hadn't a need to put up the privacy system yet, as he also found their reactions entertaining. Humans sure are funny creatures. He pulled up the security camera footage for the private parking in UA as he awaited Aizawa and his two guests. He was quite curious as to what this would be about, as he was sure that Aizawa was at his home all day for his rare day off. The possibilities are endless. Yet he knew this must be something rather serious, since it brought Aizawa to work on his day off. He calmly sipped his tea as he watched Aizawa's car enter the parking lot, and watched as he got out with a short, green-haired woman with, presumably, her son. The boy was carrying a yellow book bag, and the woman had a purse as they followed Aizawa to the school staff entrance. The two were clearly nervous and scared about something. Aizawa was slightly uncomfortable, as well as a bit spooked as well. As they neared the hallway leading to his office, he put up the privacy barriers and ready to hit the button to open his door as they arrived at it. He turned his computer to a document about the school finances and started to boil water for more tea. He hit the button precisely as Aizawa stopped in front of his office door and greeted them. "That's right, it's me, Nizu, the one who could be a dog, a mouse, or a bear. But more importantly, I'm the principal." He introduces himself quite enthusiastically as he stands his seat and waves them in. He's analyzing them as they walk in, noticing that the boy seems quite excited to meet him, yet it seems to be dampened by his anxiety and fear over what had undoubtedly been the reason for their visit here. The woman seemed to try and compose herself. She seemed to be someone who could hide her emotions in serious situations, so probably someone working in the government or something illegal, but that didn't. Tea seemed to be an option. So she clearly worked as a government employee, yet seemed to deal with tough or difficult people or clients. So maybe a secretary or maybe a lawyer, as she had also brought along a government-issued suitcase provided for all lawyers who work mainly at home. He hadn't noticed that on the security camera, it seems he'd need to upgrade their quality again. "Well, Aizawa-san, what brings you all here? And please have a seat. Wouldn't anyone like a cup of tea?" Nizu was speaking calmly, yet it seemed enthusiastic as well, as he gestured to the 3 chairs across from his desk he had set up after the call with Aizawa. He watched as they each STA down. The boy was in the middle, his mother on his right, and Aizawa on his left. "Yes, please. Thank you." The lady agreed to the tea. "I'm Midoriya Inko, and this is my son Midoriya, Izuku. Pleasure to meet you, Nizu-san." She politely introduced herself, as well as her son, with a slight tremble in her voice as she spoke. Ms. Midoriya placed her hands in her lap, clasped together and twiddling her thumbs. Midoriya gave a hesitant wave as he was introduced and looked at his own hands, holding the yellow backpack in his lap. As Nizu made the tea, he was rather quick as he had been doing so for years. He was rather proud of his ability to make tea. He placed them each in front of his guests. As he took his seat, with his own newly brewed cup of tea, he looked to Aizawa for an explanation, as he had yet to explain the reason for this visit. "We're here because of this." Aizawa opened his hand, extending it towards Midoriya as he silently asked for something. Nizu watched as Midoriya took a flash drive from the front pocket of his backpack and handed it to Aizawa, who held it up so he could see it. "The kid had broken into my apartment, which he explained was because his Quirk had told him to, and as a reward this had dropped on his face when he was caught by me. It seems his Quirk has given him a replica of a flash drive a villain has, but the contents are rather worrying. I am asking you to take a look and then help with deciding how we should proceed." As he spoke, Aizawa handed Nizu the flash drive. He nodded as he took the flash drive and plugged it into his Hero Work computer. Yes, he has specific computers for work and personal. As it booted up and loaded the contents, he took in everything that had appeared. This was indeed rather worrying. It seems Midoriya has been stalked for most of his life, and someone was compiling notes on him, which extended to those he came into contact with for long periods of time, as well as photos of him. He looked back up, taking in their state as this was revealed once more to them, and made a decision on what to do with these two as they investigated this. He clasped his paws together and looked to Ms. Midoriya. "Ms. Midoriya, in light of this situation, I believe the first and best course of action is to have you and Midoriya stay. All for one quite enjoyed telling the doctor to make the useless villain who was tailing the kid into another Nomu. He would be good for one thing now, at least. As it stands, he was still rather pissed about this situation, and was thinking of ways to draw the boy out and complete his plans as soon as possible. He wanted the boy, and he wanted the boy's quirk, yet he did not want to wield the boy's quirk. Izuku was anxiously fiddling with his hands on his lap, while listening to Nizu. This was nerve-wracking and terrifying. As Nizu spoke about where they should stay, he looked up at him, curious about where it would be. Yet, he wasn't quite expecting what he was going to say next. Ms. Midoriya, in light of this situation, I believe the first and best course of action is to have you and Midoriya stay at UA. We have dorms for students who live too far away to attend after their acceptance, as well as dorms for teachers if they so choose to stay. We have the security needed to ensure yours and Midoriya's safety, along with the means to provide for your needs with little to be desired as one of the wealthiest institutes in education, as well as pro-heroes being around campus as an extra precaution. Aizawa-san seemed to agree, while Izuku's eyes went wide and he looked to his mother. She looked equally as shocked, but seemed to get a grasp so she could answer. Izuku blinked twice, deciding today was a dream and pinching his arm. He winced, then registered that he had not, in fact, woken up and then decided to focus back to the present again. He didn't notice Aizawa and Nizu's amused glances at his actions. Inko was shocked by the offer to stay at UA, but secretly very relieved. She knew that UA had the best protection and security, as well as having pro-heroes here 24/7. She composed herself, masking her shock as she slowly came to terms that this was indeed happening. Clearing her throat, she got Nizu's attention so she could ask some things pertaining to her work and her son's education. While I would gladly accept this offer, I do have to question how I would continue my job, as well as my son's education. He just started middle school, and I am a lawyer. I may need to leave and meet clients, and Izuku needs to find a way to continue his education so he may graduate. Her voice was professional, but it conveyed that she would do anything for her son, no matter her job. She looked at Nizu for his answer. Ms. Midoriya, you may leave to meet a client as long as one hero is with you. As for Midoriya's education, may I see where he is? Students tend to learn at different rates, and while he is here, he will be a ward of you. With you as well. Nizu moved to grab his tea as he spoke. There was a gleam in his eye as he asked. Inko nodded her assent. Very well. Midoriya, would you mind coming to my office tomorrow morning to take a test? So, I may compile a course suited to your current level of education. Nedzu asked. No, sir, I don't mind. Midoriya's reply was shaky, clearly nervous and overwhelmed. Nizu actually likes teaching, as he had been a teacher before becoming the principal. Though he holds a grudge against humanity for the way they act, especially those who had a part in his earlier years of torment. He enjoys knowledge, and those who are intelligent enough to understand some of the complexities of this world and the flaws of society. As he could tell so far, Midoriya seemed to be an intelligent child, and his quirk was quite interesting as well. There weren't that many sentient quirks after all, yet they weren't quite sought out as most of their users didn't know how to use them, nor could they fully control them. As it was, Midoriya's quirk was quite rare, and his sense of control over it was as well. It was no surprise villains were after him. With his quirk, plus his intelligence, if he turned to the villain's side, it would spell trouble for the heroes. As it was, they were fortunate that his quirk has lifted him the flash drive, which brought them here. Well then, I shall compile a test for Midoriya to take tomorrow morning. Whilst I take care of things here, Aizawa, why don't you show them to the dorms they shall stay in for the foreseeable future? Nizu gestured for them to proceed to leave, seeing fit to end the discussion now and get them settled. Aizawa nodded in acknowledgement to Nizu, leading the Midoriyas out of the office. As they walked silently through the halls, he let his mind wander to whoever could have been following the kid for so long. It was clearly because of his quirk, as they had went through great pains to get everything they could about it inside the reports. That also begs the question, How did they know Abe buoyed his quirks so early on, as they had seen reports dated back to when the kid was 4? Sighing, he moved his hair from his face and turned his face slightly towards. He started telling her what dorms they would be in and the heroes that occupied it with them as well. You'll be in dorm building G, used by teachers here. The heroes that reside there full-time are pro-hero Present Mike and pro-heroes Flora and Fauna. They can properly introduce themselves when you meet. Your rooms will be right across from each other, and the dorm has a fully stocked kitchen, communal bathroom, one for each gender, and a living room. Nodded along, and they arrived at his car to grab their bags. He grabbed S, and Midoriya grabbed his. They walked outside and went behind the school building towards the buildings in the back. All for One was calming down now. He could work with this. He just needed someone to infiltrate you. When Midoriya turns 15. Someone loyal, and he had the perfect candidate. Yes, the Aoyamas were looking for a quirk for their poor quirkless son. He'll do nicely. He just needs a few lessons to be the perfect spy. Aoyama Yuga was diagnosed as quirkless at the age of 5, when his peers had been manifesting their own quirks, and he hadn't. His parents brought in a private doctor to see why he was behind his peers and had him do multiple tests on the child to determine what was wrong. Imagine their shock when the results all came up negative, leaving them blaming the other for this occurrence. As they were a relatively wealthy family, they paid off the doctor to forge reports to say that he was just a late bloomer and would eventually manifest his own quirk. As they scoured everywhere on how to get him, all came to a head when they got a call from a doctor's office in Mizudafu. A man calling himself the doctor came with a solution to their little, told them of a man who could give their son a quirk, but in return, they would need to do him a favor. They were overjoyed, saying they would do anything if their son could have a quirk. Boy, did they regret that after learning of this favor. Yuga was ecstatic. He was finally getting a quirk, and now maybe his parents will love him again. He couldn't wait. They were currently on their way to their mysterious benefactor, the person who was giving him the quirk. They didn't know what it was, but they didn't particularly care as long as their son wasn't a quirkless freak. Then they were content. As they pulled into their designated meet-up spot, Yuga felt a wave of dread. He didn't know why, but he had the feeling something bad's gonna happen. But he shrugged it off. His parents seemed fine, so he did his best to ignore it. At least there would be no more doctors sticking needles into him. He followed his parents' lead, getting out of the car and walking inside the warehouse. It was old, rusting in most places and covered in graffiti. It also smelled like the sewer. He would know. He'd had to sleep there once after all. Covering his mouth with his hand, he glanced around curiously. They walked through the old, creaking door and into the building. The first thing he noticed was the smell. Where outside it smelled like the sewer, inside it smelled like a lab. Antiseptic and chemicals. He could see vials of different things on shelves and tubes with. Oh my God, are those body parts? He felt fear creep up, and he shivered, turning away quickly and covering his mouth for a whole different reason now. That was when he noticed the 2 men near the back. One was hooked up to all kinds of machines, and he didn't seem to have a face. He looked akin to a wrinkled thumb. Yuga thought wryly with a hint of fear, and person next to him was short. He had a balding head and a thick, wiry mustache, and he wore goggles and typical doctor attire, aside from the thick gloves covering his hands. Yuga wasn't so sure he wanted this anymore, but he looked to his parents, seeing them still excited yet anxious. His mother was rubbing her left arm, and his father was tapping his hands against the sides of his pants. Yuga had to do this for them to love him like they used to. So he straightened his back, putting his hands clasped together behind his back, and held his head high, like how his father taught him to do when he was in public. After all, you should never let people know what you are, Yuga. Do not embarrass us further. When All for One heard the Aoyamas walk in, he straightened before they saw him. He felt for the quirk he wished to transfer over, as it was of no use to him. It was a simple naval laser he had taken from someone who had defied him years ago. Ah, you've arrived. Shall we transfer the quirk first? Then we shall tell you what we ask in return. The doctor's voice irritated him, as it always has. The parents were quick to agree, and they ushered their son to stand by him. He reached out, took the boy's head in his hand, and pushed the quirk into him. Now, since the boy was willingly taking the quirk, it was mild pain throughout his body, whereas if it were forceful, It would be like fire coursing through their body. He took his hand back, regarding the boy as much as he could not, in fact, see. He hadn't heard the boy utter a word, except for an intake of breath as he transferred the quirk to him. Ah, yes, he should do nicely. Now, how to go about that would do, yes. He was surely a genius. Now he shall get the doctor to tell them his favor, and tell them they would get the rest of the details at a later date. It had been a chaotic night, but they had managed. Izuku had woken up to his mother, who had gotten him so he could be on time for his test with Principal Nizu. He was nervous, anxiously twiddling his fingers as he ate what he could stomach for hadn't met the other residents last night, as they had been called out for hero work, so they should be able to meet them tonight or tomorrow. He couldn't wait to meet them, especially Present Mike. He was a huge fan of his radio show. He let System slither under his shirt as Aizawa-san came into the kitchen. Aizawa-san nodded at Izu to follow, and he jumped down from his chair. He gave his mother a hug as she wished him luck, and he followed Aizawa-san back to Nizu's office. When they arrived, the door opened itself, much like it had done the day before. He saw Nizu sitting at his desk, holding a pack of papers in one hand and sipping a cup of tea in the other. Directly across from him sat another steaming cup of tea, along with a pencil and some spare notebook paper in case he wishes to use it for his inside. He waved bye to Aizawa-san and gave a shaky smile to Nizu. Sitting down, he took a deep breath. Hello, Midoriya-san. Are you ready for the test? It is important that you remember you are not expected to know everything. This is just to see where you are academically. You have for now until the school bell rings for dismissal to finish. I have prepared you a cup of lavender tea. It helps with nerves, you see. Setting the packet in front of Izuku, he nodded at him, and Nizu continued. Then you may start whenever you're ready. Now, as Nizu cackled in his office as he checked Midoriya's test, Aizawa was debating whether he wanted to retire or get a different job. He had picked the kid up and helped him to Nizus earlier that morning, only to walk by his office at 2:30 p.m. on his way to the faculty room when he heard it. The rat was cackling while grading the kid's test. He could feel his sanity slipping through his grasp as he gripped the essays in his hands tighter, causing a few wrinkles, and started walking away. He could not deal with this today. He just wanted coffee and a nap. Ping ping, he sighed, loosening his grip and holding the papers in one hand as he grabbed his phone from his pocket. Clicking the on button, he swiped up and typed in his PIN. Hizashi, guess who just got back? And what's this I hear about 2 new residents in the teacher's dorms? No, he was not doing this now. He shut his phone off and shoved it back into his pocket, taking a left turn and opening the only door in that hall. He went straight to his desk, setting the essays down and grabbing his mug. He beelined to the coffee pot, newly brewed as well, and poured himself a cup. His mug was a gift from Namuri. It was a black cup with a picture of a cat wearing his hero goggles curled up on top of a yellow sleeping bag. She had it made, and he was very much touched. He loved the thing. He would never admit that. He took a sip, closing his eyes and relishing the warmth as he sat in his chair. He set the mug down and pulled his hair into a bun as he grabbed his red marker. He had essays to grade and students to fail. He deadpanned at the first he picked up. He had them write a 3-page essay on their quirks, strengths, and weaknesses. He wanted them to identify what they could and couldn't do and find ways to improve. This student had written down for his first sentence what he wanted his hero name to be, even though they had yet to choose them, and it was finger guns. His quirk was not finger guns. His quirk was temporarily blinding someone for 15 seconds. This was going to be a long day, he thought, taking another sip of his coffee. Nizu was impressed. Midoriya had answered everything, though not all of it had been correct, but he had even explained his thought process on the spare paper as he worked throughout the problems. His score was astounding for his age, and he would only grow smarter as he grew older. He had given him 20 questions for each subject, growing more difficult with each question. He had scored 20 to 20 for reading comprehension, 15/20 for math, 17/20 for science, 18/20 for history, 20/20 for English, and 19/20 on analysis. He had put those in as he was quite curious. Plus, it was a class here that was optional to any student. One of his creations was that he did quite love analyzing things, yet few students ever took the course. He had to dock a few points on the analysis because it was rather unorganized, though he could understand perfectly what Midoriya had been saying. Well then, now all he had to do was figure out the best course for Midoriya to study. He could always let him do online schooling until he passed middle school. Then he could either continue online or apply to UA for high school. The choice would be his, but he could sign up to learn another language, as it seems he is already fluent in English. Nizu himself was considering teaching him more about analysis if he would be interested. Oh yes, that would be splendid. He hasn't had a student in years, and he has great potential in the area, as most, if not all, of his work is that of professional, if not for the disorganization of it. There were quite a few options, yet he shall let Midoriya decide tomorrow. He'd just take a test for about 6 hours. All for One had given him and his family a week to learn about his new power before he called on them again. They had parted before with the knowledge that Yuga, himself, would be carrying out the favor. This made him extremely nervous and weary. He had a very bad feeling about what it might be, and he really just wants to leave it and run. Alas, he doesn't want to leave his parents. He had actually been able to eat with them this past week. Having a quirk was amazing, even if he had stomach aches most days now. They were going to the warehouse again, and he could hear crows cawing somewhere on the roof this time. It was even more creepy than the last they had been here. The door still creaked as they opened it, yet when they stepped inside, there was a tube with green bubbling liquid holding something floating inside. He couldn't quite see it fully, but it looked vaguely human-like, and he really didn't want to know what it was. Yuga turned his gaze to the back, where the two men were last time, and saw them both in the same spot. He followed, slightly behind his parents, as they walked over, standing in front of them a few feet away. They were both clearly nervous, as was he, but he stood as he had before. All for One has decided to take Aoyama as an informant of sorts. He shall be trained in stealth and information gathering from now until he is to enter the UA High. He shall learn of his task there when we deem him suitable for such information. Until then, he is expected to go to Warehouse F6 to be taught what he'll need to know. Any questions? The doctor was the one to speak, and Yuga was scared now. He had known he would be the one to do the favor, but now he's expected to work for someone, most likely a villain, and presumably spy on the heroes of UA. The doctor could tell from just looking at the boy he was scared. This simply wouldn't do if they wanted him to be competent enough to get them the information they're longing. Alas, it seemed you need to find someone to teach the boy to toughen up some. Well, if it goes sideways, he could always use more test subjects. At that thought, he looked up. He had a new project he had been working on for a few days now. He called it Project Nomu. He has gotten a test subject and is trying to force multiple quirks into it and see if they survive or not. Well, that's not all he wishes to accomplish, but it's what he has to get down first before he could work on the more exciting bit of this project. But the first he had done was a fluke and had managed to survive and retain the ability to think and speak. They called it Kirojiri and had it with the brat. What a waste of a good subject, too. He hadn't yet managed to recreate that, as his research had all gone up in flames during one of his experiments gone wrong. But all is well. As they are coming along nicely, as it stands, he should be able to make them successfully in the next 5 years. He has high hopes for these creatures. As the Aoyamas left, having no questions after having gone pale and hurriedly leaving, he moved over to the tube holding the subject and checked its vitals. Grabbing a pen and clicking it, he wrote down on his clipboard, "Subject A17 has failed," and tossed the board aside. Mumbling to himself, he turned and walked over to All for One to tell him of the failed subject. Present Mike had gotten back from his mission, excited to meet his new roommates, and ready to finally take off his costume and shower. He loved being a hero, but he does not like the smelliness some of the jobs come with. He had to chase a villain through the sewer. At one point, he had slipped while running and slid right into a wall, falling and landing in a puddle of sewage before having to resume the chase. He could not wait for that shower. He walked into the dorm, a smile on his face as he greeted the green-haired lady who was sitting on the couch. She had looked over towards him when he had opened the door. "Hello, I'm Present Mike. Nice to meet you. I assume you're one of the new roommates." He greeted, taking off his boots before taking them by the tops and walking further into the room. "I'm Midoriya Inko. Nice to meet you, Mr. Present Mike. Me and my son are indeed living here for the foreseeable future." He saw her smile as she talked. standing up and moving to greet him better. He saw her come to a halt, wrinkling her nose a bit as she strained to remain polite and not cover her face with her hands as she finally caught the smell of sewage on him. "Well, Mike-san, I'll prepare some tea for us, and we may continue our conversation once you have showered and changed, yes?" she asked, Sully turning towards the kitchen as she simply nodded in reply, also wrinkling his nose at his smell. He walked towards his room, the one closest to the living area on the right side of the corridor. He went inside, shutting the door behind him as he went toward his closet to grab a pair of sweatpants and a t-shirt. He grabbed his glasses case as well, putting his costume glasses on his desk as he passed it. Leaving his room, he went to the men's communal bathroom, going straight to the showers and taking his suit off. He carefully set it outside of the shower stall, stepping under the water and shivering a bit. He stayed, just glad to get rid of that awful stench, even if it was cold water. Izuku woke up to System nudging his face. He blinked blearily, sitting up and rubbing his eyes. He had fallen asleep on the couch in the living area after the test. He looked up at the blue screen in front of him. Stretching, he yawned and blinked hard to clear his vision. "Izuku, your task is to write a short story about becoming a villain and get it published. Your time limit is 3 days." Reading this, his eyes widened a bit, and he dropped his hands. He only had 3 days to write a story and get it published. How was he going to do that? First, he would need to make a main character, then come up with why he became a villain. Then he would need to make his character delve into the life of a criminal in a way readers would understand and tell, and do all of this in just 3 days. Oh God, he was freaking out. He tried to take a few calming breaths before an idea came to him. He didn't have to make a long, complicated story. He just needed to make a short story about a person becoming a villain. He could just make a kid's story. It should be easy, right? Wrong. He was so wrong. Even children's books were hard because he needed to make it to where children could understand and read it easily. Yet it had to have a hidden message like other children's stories. Plus, he needed to make it relatable in some way. Yet he was somewhat drawing a blank, and now his head hurt. Yet he had already made a character sheet, but he had come up with a backstory that was too complicated and he needed to redo it, and he just couldn't. He set the pencil down, erasure partly chewed off as he finally looked around him. Blinking, he set about grabbing the discarded papers, going through what could be useful or salvageable and throwing away the useless pieces. He stood up, hand full of papers to be thrown away, and made his way to the kitchen and out of his room. System was asleep under his shirt wrapped around his torso, so he was not helpful at all with this task. He rubbed his eyes with his free hand, sighing as he made it to the kitchen. He tossed the papers in a trash can he passed, and mumbled a hi to Mother as he passed her to start boiling some water so he could have some tea. He paused, blinking a bit as he set the pot on the stove. Turning around, he took notice of another individual in the kitchen with his mother. Oh my gosh, that is Present Mike. Present Mike is sitting down and having tea with his mother, now looking at him with a wide grin, and Izuku was so fanboying right now. Inko chuckled to herself as she watched her son do a double take at the hero seated across from her. She had made them both some lavender chamomile tea to relax, and they had sat down in the kitchen to chat. "Izuku, sweetie, you should introduce yourself first before you start to ask him anything," she gently reminded her son, amused. She watched as he shook his head before wringing his hands as he gave a small bow, no doubt due to System sleeping around his torso again. She sighed slightly. That snake sure loves sleep. "Hello, Mr. Present Mike, sir. I'm Midoriya, Izuku. I'm a big fan of your radio show," Izuku exclaimed, nerves clear in the way his voice trembled slightly. She smiled softly as she took a sip of her tea, holding the tea cupped in her hands, relishing the small bit of warmth it granted her. "Hello, little listener. Just call me Yamada if you want. Present Mike is kind of mouthful. Besides, we're living together now," Yamada-san said, keeping his voice upbeat and cheerful as she had noticed. He was clearly an extrovert, which also helps with his hero persona, as he is portrayed as a very cheerful and happy person who has a tendency to talk loud. This is all still true, but he is more quiet and has less cheer due to not having to force it for long periods of time. She has worked with other pro heroes before as a lawyer, so she has also had to deal with their personas and has familiarized herself with how they may act differently alone as opposed to near others. "Yes, Sir Yamada-san. Izuku beamed, one of his hands tugging on his shirt a bit as he stood up straight. Yamada-san, I've always wondered if your voice could possibly ricochet off of walls in an enclosed space. Or does it echo if you do that? Izuku had a hand under his chin as he started to mutter a bit before Yamada had answered, voice thoughtful. Well, I haven't tried that, but I do know that underground, like in the sewers, it doesn't work well because of all of the different tunnels. It echoes and loses power, so it isn't very effective to use it underground, but in a closed room I could try and see. He answered. Izuku was grinning as he listened, before a squealing interrupted them. Izuku jumped a bit, startled, and turned to the kettle to take it off the stove, turning the dial to cut it off. He turned back around, smiling sheepishly as he rubbed the back of his neck. Inko let out a chuckle at this, as Yamada smiled in amusement, eyes crinkling. Sorry, I kind of forgot about that. Izuku trailed off slightly, eyes furrowed as he was clearly thinking of something. She watched as his eyes snapped up, and he looked at Yamada in consideration, before nodding to himself and standing up straighter. Yamada-san, you are an English teacher. Do you know anything about writing a story? Izuku asked, as she glanced over at Yamada. She knew Izuku had a task to write a short story, and that was what he had been working on in his room for the last hour. Well, I teach English, which requires me to know how to read and write the language. So I've had to write different stories and papers in English to get my degree to teach. So yes, you could say I know a thing or two about writing a story. Yamada answered, voice clearly showing his puzzlement at the question. Would you please help me? I've been given the task to write a short story and get it published in 3 days by my Quirk, and I'm struggling. I never thought writing a short story would be this hard. Even trying to write a children's book is hard. Izuku said, a bit sheepish and a bit baffled. It was rather cute to her. I wouldn't mind, listener, though what about your Quirk? I am curious about how that works. Yamada asked, a bit confused as he took a sip of his tea. Izuku grabbed a tea bag from the cabinet, grabbed a teacup and poured the hot water in before setting, adding a bit of honey and stirring, adding the tea bag last. She noticed he had gotten Earl Grey, a classic black tea, and smiled. It was Izuku's go-to for when he was stressed, not one of the teas said to be stress relief like chamomile. He just wanted a strong tea. He set his cup down on the table, taking the seat beside hers. My Quirk is called System. It takes the form of a snake called System that stays on me. I get certain tasks with time limits. If I complete a task in time, then I get a reward. They vary, as I could get information in the form of envelopes, videos, or pictures. I could also get a new power or simply objects, which would be on the more expensive side of the spectrum most times. Failure to complete a task means I will get punished. I am told it varies. Yet of the 4 times I have failed, the punishment has been electrocution. It varied in strength depending on how much my body could handle at the time of punishment. Izuku explained, foregoing the talk of how he had gotten here, deeming it unnecessary to this conversation, and not mentioning the new power he had gotten as a reward from his last task. Aizawa was seriously considering early retirement. He did not want to deal with whatever he had just walked into by going to the teacher's dorm. He had just wanted to check on the Midoriyas before going to his apartment for a bit, intending to grab a to-go bag and his cat, affectionately named Cyclops, due to the fact he has one eye. He had walked into the dorm, stopping short as he saw Hisashi and the kid at the small coffee table in front of the couch with papers spread around them and talking animatedly about something. Ms. Midoriya was sitting on the couch, as opposed to the two on the floor, laptop in her lap as she typed. He could only assume she was doing some of her work. He nodded slightly to himself, slowly backing out and closing the door. He turned his back, walking silently away as he decided to stay at his apartment for a bit longer in hopes of arriving to a quieter dorm later. Flora and Fauna should be getting back from their mission tomorrow, having a stakeout mission. They had a drag bus they were called in for, as they were more a limelight hero duo, so they tended to take daylight or nighttime hero work. They didn't mind the spotlight, but they did not like too much of it as they liked having a certain level of privacy. He could respect that, as the public knew little to nothing about him, as he is a nighttime hero, tending to stick to the shadows and stay hidden. Surely, they would make his stay in the dorms a slightly calmer experience. Oh, who was he kidding? Hisashi was there, and he loved to try and gossip with him. though he was not opposed to talking about Endeavor's latest scandal. Izuku was absolutely beaming as he looked at the rough draft for his short story. System had said nothing about getting outside help, so he was using everything at his disposal. Yamada-san was a great help, and now all he has to do is reread it, make a few adjustments, and come up with a way to get it published. Right, okay, he could totally do this. Yamada-san, how do I get published? Izuku looked up to Yamada-san, eyes wide and questioning. Yamada-san seemed to pause to think it over, so he looked over to his mother, who was working on some documents for her new case. Mom, how do I get published? He asked her instead. She looked up thoughtful. Well, I've been the lawyer of a few authors before. I could contact them to ask if they could help publish your book, sweetie. She took out her phone, scrolling a bit before taping something and making a call. He watched her type something on her laptop as she spoke over the phone, seeming to pull up what she wished as she bid the person bye, and turned to Izuku. Sweetie, I've got the website of a children's publisher pulled up. Look over it and tell me if you think this one would work. If you think so, I can send over the final draft of the story, and they can look it over before deciding if they want to publish it or not. I will tell them it would need to be published by Friday, as that was the day of the deadline. Izuku smiled at his mother as he was handed the laptop. Scrolling through the website, he saw other authors' works that were published through them as well, reading over their reviews and genres as he browsed. He took about 5 minutes to think it over before deciding the sooner the better. He wasn't looking for the story to become popular and wasn't that concerned about the reputation nor known authors of the publisher. He just needed to get it done before he got punished again. He could feel the phantom pains from the small Lichtenberg scars on his back. This one seems good, Mom. Thank you. Izuku grinned up at her as he handed her the laptop back. Thank you, Yamada-san. Izuku turned to Yamada and grinned at him as well. He started to gather the papers they used, the character sheets, story outline, discarded ideas, and the rough draft. He needed to reread the draft and make another improved one to send in. If they wished to make changes before publishing, he would need to make one other final draft, yet he was also kind of excited to see how the story would do as he had kind of enjoyed writing it. He wasn't sure if he could do it again, not very confident in himself enough to write something by himself. He knew he was too insecure about certain things for him to be comfortable with putting his own thoughts and ideas out there for people to see and read. It was anxiety-inducing, yet he would be doing just that by pursuing a career in Quirk analysis. He just needs to think of this as a start to becoming more confident in his pursuit of written works. Someday he wished to publish analysis, maybe even a book on how to become an analyst for people to read in the future, but that wasn't now, and this wasn't nonfiction. He grabbed the papers together, placing them inside a folder before gathering his writing utensils and erasers, putting them inside his pencil pouch, and standing up. He grabbed his discarded teacup, empty now, and made his way to the kitchen to place it in the sink. Setting his pouch and folder on the table, he washed his cup and placed it on the drying rack. He grabbed his things and went to his room, intent to revise everything and finish the story before giving it back to his mother for her to give to the publisher. He felt something moving, curling a bit tighter before loosening on his torso, feeling as System slithered up to wrap around his shoulders instead. He flicked out his tongue, hissing as if he had yawned, and moving his face in front of Izuku's. So kid, what have you done so far? Yugo was dropped off at Warehouse F6, his parents wishing him well, but leaving as soon as he stepped out of the car. He wrung his hands together, trying to stop how shaky they were. He felt like he was doomed. He was fully aware he could die any time he was near them. They held all of the power, and he was only here since they deemed him useful. The second he wasn't well, he shuddered, not wishing to finish that thought as his mind went back to that thing in the green liquid. He walked forward, going towards the door to the warehouse, before glancing around, paranoid. He felt like eyes were on him. It made his heart beat faster as he grabbed the handle. The door creaked as he opened it, the sound grating his ears like nails on a chalkboard. He walked inside, feeling a smidge of relief that all for one wasn't here this time. Instead, it was just the doctor and a guy. He looked him over, noticing him holding knives in each hand, fingers running over the edges of the blades, almost like he was caressing them. He stopped to shudder, a thought crossing his mind about why he might have them to begin with. Nothing good, that's for sure. He walked forwards, standing about 5 feet in front of them before bowing at the waist in greeting, aware that it was something his parents found demeaning of their status, yet also aware if he disrespected them, he might end up just another experiment of the doctor's. "Ah, good you've arrived. You may stand." The doctor chuckled, his laughter high-pitched with a gravely undertone, like he had a cold. "This is Yukamura-san. He shall be your first instructor. He is here to develop your ability to endure pain, toughen you up a bit so you don't break easily. After all, if you can't endure pain and continue to fight, then you will inevitably fail at your mission. If you fail well, I guess you could infer what would happen." Yuga gulped, hands starting to shake, so he held them behind his back, clasped at the wrist. He just hoped nothing left marks, as they would be hard to explain to anyone who became curious. He knew this would hurt, yet he also knew it would not compare to what the doctor would do should he fail. Roman had been contacted by Midoriya-san. She had been his lawyer when he had been sued for copyright. He had not done it, and she had proven it in court. He owed her a lot, as she had saved his job as a publisher. So when she had asked him about looking over a possible story he could publish written by her son, he had agreed to look it over and see what he could do. He had not been expecting to get sent a Google document for a children's book about turning to a life of villainy. It was a good story as well, so he would definitely publish it. Now he just had to get it done by the next day, as the kid's Quirk had a deadline for this publication. He would do it. He just needed to make a few copies before sending them out to a trusted friend's bookstore for a test sale. This was made easier as the kid had even drawn the cover art and illustrations for children throughout the book. The kid had talent, and he couldn't wait to see how this would do. Izuku had spoken to his mother after she had received the email confirmation that the story would be published and sold in a bookshop owned by the publisher's friend. They had to sit down and discuss the pseudonym he would put the book under and how to handle the money it could potentially make. They had decided to put it into a savings account for Izuku to use when he got older, a safety net of sorts. He had been ecstatic that it worked out. He just hoped the publisher was right and he could make the copies by the morning and get them to the bookshop in time to meet the deadline. They had learned the hard way that the deadline for these things lasted until 12 p.m., then it expired and the punishment started. He had been a second too late for one of them, resulting in his last punishment, which was the one to leave the Lichtenberg scars along his back. Cool as they looked, he could really do without them as they had caused him great pain. He grabbed his notebook, the one for criminal analysis, and turned on the news to watch the latest hero and villain fight. It was about Endeavor stopping a bank robbery. He sighed, pausing it and getting up to grab his book on Endeavor. It seems he would have to update the information in the book now. He disliked Endeavor, as he had been rewarded information on him, as well as a few tasks to analyze what he had done wrong, how he could fix it, and the effects his actions had on the property and civilians that could have been avoided easily. Inko had been called into work to meet with her new client, Amanda Coventry. She was American and had been caught up in a villain attack. She had been severely harmed by the hero that had shown up to help, having to be put into the hospital and losing her leg due to how severe the burns had been. She wished to meet with her as she was still in the hospital. Her husband had to go back to America to take care of their shop. The attack had been on Monday, and she had regained consciousness Wednesday. Her husband had to leave this morning, and she had wanted to stay and take legal action on the hero, as they had also injured multiple other bystanders, damaging a lot of property, as well as they had pursued the villain with a reckless abandon. Others have been speaking up recently about this hero as well, having accusations thrown at her since her debut last fall. Flamebird was a female hero who had made her debut last fall, being able to make wings of fire, able to manipulate her wings to use the flames and shower fire at people. It is like Hawks, except she could only hover above the ground about 10 feet, and she could not control where a fire ended. She could just shoot them off like Hawks could manipulate his feathers, though he could control each individual feather where she had no control. This has proven to be an issue, as she has never taken into account the civilians while fighting. She preferred to use her quirk opposed to fighting in hand-to-hand or using the area around her as an advantage. Inko was prepared, as a few months after her debut, Izuku had been tasked to write up an analysis about everything she had been doing wrong and how she should have handled her fights, as well as a better use of her quirk. She was very proud of how smart her son is, and his analysis has proven useful to some of her cases as well. He had been rewarded with a limited edition, collector's Eraserhead-themed backpack. She walked inside the room. The hero assigned to accompany her stayed by the door for client privacy and sat down in the chair by the woman. She placed her briefcase, company commission, by her side and sat straight as she gave Mrs. Coventry a polite smile. "Hello, Mrs. Coventry. It is a pleasure to meet you." Inko placed her hands neatly folded on her lap, crossing her legs, and gave Mrs. Coventry her full attention. She felt bad, as she had only been here for a business trip with an extended stay as a small vacation with her husband. She had been unfortunate with how her trip ended up, and Inko was going to do her damn best to give her and all of the other unfortunate victims of this hero justice. This was precisely why she had become a lawyer, seeking to help others without much risk to her and her family like heroes. She also knew that heroes were not infallible, as they were humans like everyone else. So she was prepared to represent those the heroes may have done wrong, those who the heroes could not help, or people who wished for a way out of some form of contract they had been in, like marriage or jobs. "Nice to meet you as well, Ms. Midoriya." Mrs. Coventry had turned to fully face her, and she got a better view of her face as she had turned more into the light. The right side of her face was bandaged. She could see some of the red, gnarled skin that had been burned peeking from the sides. Her hair had to be cut, as most had been burned off, starting to sear her scalp as it seemed to melt into her head. "Well then, from my understanding you wish to file for a lawsuit against the hero Flamebird. Do you mind if I record further questions and answers as a precaution?" Inko asked, holding up the small voice recorder her firm had all employees carry. As a new policy, they would try and have voice recordings of them as they got statements or question their clients to avoid hearsay or confusion from blossoming about who said what in trials or court. "I don't mind. There is nothing to hide after all." Mrs. Coventry permitted. Inko nodded, holding the button down for precisely 3 seconds before releasing it and setting it on the bed in front of her and by her client. "Now, to my understanding you wish to pursue a lawsuit on the Nero Flamebird, as she was the one to harm you, not the villain, during the attack. You stated you had been 20 feet away from the chase, yet you and others standing by were still hit with her flames. May I ask what you were doing at the time of the attack?" Inko grabbed out her work clipboard, clicking her pen as she readied to write down the answers her client provided. Aoyama was glad to have long sleeves. He had been subjected to what the doctor called light torture in the hopes that should he be captured, he would not talk. He wasn't sure if he would survive to even graduate middle school, let alone attend UA High. When going out, he now wore ruffled, fashionable long-sleeve shirts, usually white, with ruffled sleeves and ruffled edges that poofed out slightly. His mother had been the one to suggest this, as she had a reputation to keep, and her son walking around with obvious injuries would cause unwanted attention, possibly ruining her reputation as well. He was currently on his way back from his school, having been distancing himself even further from his peers. He felt unworthy of having friends, as he was being trained to become a villain to spy on the pro-heroes and aspiring heroes in training. He felt hatred in his heart, hating himself and the villains for forcing him into this. Hating his parents for basically selling him to villains just so he could get a quirk, then abandoning him to the villains to use as they please so they may be safe. He hated it all, yet he still loved his parents. They were just doing what they could to survive, and he would gladly keep doing this if it guaranteed their safety. He did not have a training session for this afternoon, which he was grateful for, as yesterday's had left him with multiple cuts that had to be bandaged and hidden. He was still sore as well, and his stomach had been hurting since he had first used a navel laser. He had been doing small training sessions at home to help gain a semblance of control over the quirk. His quirk, he mentally reminded himself. It was Friday, and he went to a small bookshop he liked. The owner was a nice man. He opened it with his wife, and they were expecting a baby sometime soon. He had stumbled upon this place when he had been left outside by his parents again. They had let him stay for the night in their store, keeping it open all night, so he would have company and someone to watch over him. Walking inside, he noticed a small display for a children's book, newly published it seemed, on a small table in front of the door. It had an illustration of a person knelt on the ground, face shadowed as he faced the sky in the rain. It seemed interesting, so he picked it up to flip through it. For a children's book, the art was appealing. He rooted around in his pocket, grabbing his wallet to see how much money he had left from his monthly allowance in hopes of having enough to buy the book. He waked up to the counter, smiling at Melvin, the owner, as he placed the book down. Melvin looked at it as he brought his wallet out. "Ah, yes. We just got this book this morning. It has just been published by a new author going by the name Deku. This is the first store it is being sold in. Might I add, the story is quite good for a first-time author as well. Good pick." He smiled at Yuga, ringing up the book and handing it back as Yuga gave him the $5 the book cost. "Well, how have you been? Haven't seen you in a while." Yuga gave a small smile as he grabbed the book after paying, glancing at the cover once more and noticing that the author's name was written in small script at the bottom. It just said by Deku. He stayed there for a bit, chatting with Melvin and asking about the man's family. Apparently, the baby was going to a little girl, and she was due in about 5 months. They were still thinking of baby names as well. He had to leave shortly after, as he had to get home to freshen up, as his mother had a flight back to France that evening for her show. He had to be seen seeing her off, all to keep up appearances for the good publicity she receives for having a happy, loving, perfect family. Izuku woke up Friday afternoon to a blue screen hovering above his face. He closed his eyes, rolled over, hoping to fall back to sleep. If something had not been dropped on his head again, that is, sitting up, he brought his arms up to stretch, letting out a yawn. He blinked the blurry spots from his eyes, wiping his hands across them before glancing around for what had fallen first. He felt around the covers, hand grasping the corner of an envelope. He grabbed it, setting it on his lap, and looking up at the blue screen to read it. "Congratulations, you have successfully sold one of your books. Your reward is an envelope containing information of an open investigation about Lucille's disappearance." Izuku knew about that case. It happened a few years ago. A girl was sent to Japan as an exchange student. She had a rare medical quirk where she could use her BLD to heal others. She went missing a month into her stay. Nobody knew what happened, and due to how rare her quirk was, it's still an active investigation. This could be groundbreaking information that could solve her case. He threw his covers back, jumping up from his bed and running to the communal area in the dorm hoping to find someone. He ran into Izawa-san first. He had been on the sofa grading essays and stopped in front of him. Holding the envelope out to him, he started to speak. "Izawa-san, someone bought my book, and the system gave me an envelope with information regarding Lucille's disappearance, and I knew that they hadn't had any breakthroughs, so I thought this would help," and moved the envelope into Izawa's hands. He was out of breath, as he hadn't stopped to breathe while he was explaining, thinking this more important than that. "Whoa, kid, Bree." Izawa took the envelope from the kid, but put a hand on his shoulder to steady him. Izawa watched as the kid took a couple deep breaths before he retracted his hold and opened the envelope. He pulled out the folded paper inside and unfolded them. In total, there were about 3 pages. Each page were detailed notes dissecting the quirk of Lucille Nelson, the girl who went missing a few years ago with a rare healing quirk. He was assigned her case. They had exhausted all of their leads, and the search had been put on hold for about a year. He glanced over the papers, stopping when he neared the end of the 3rd page. "Subject has been deemed unfit to continue. She will be moved to Project 443, then disposed of. We shall take the subject's quirk for further testing." His BLD went cold. Then he checked the pages for a date, finding one at the top, dated for 20XX, the year she had gone missing. So she had been experimented on, had her quirk taken, and been disposed of in only a few months. The search up till now had been all for naught, as they were now looking for the corpse of Lucille and searching the ones responsible for her abduction and murder. He needed to get these papers to Nizu so he could look at them. Maybe the rat could find some clues to where she had been held. He hoped so. The least they could do now was bring closure to her family overseas. The doctor hummed in satisfaction. They had finally made progress on Anomu. He had successfully given Anomu 2 additional quirks that weren't compatible with Anomu's body. The subject that had become the Nomu had lasted about 3 hours before their body had rejected the quirks and caused the quirks to backfire. The doctor finished typing his notes and put in the date and time of death before he cracked his fingers and spun his chair back around. "It's time." He watched as the BLD drained from the boy's face. He stood, making Aoyama follow him as they went to draw his BLD. He had some tests he wanted to do, combining the boy's BLD with that of a Nomu, seeing if the BLD of Quirkless would help the Nomu hold more quirks. Regardless, he would use the boy's BLD for further researching the Quirkless, and their inability to gain a quirk as they age look the others. It was truly fascinating, as well as why quirks had come about. The possibilities were endless, and he felt his skin prickle in excitement at the new experiments he would conduct. He just needed a new Quirkless, preferably a kid, to test. All for One tapped his finger against the chair he was in. The monitors around him flashed as he spied upon Tamura's training. Thanks to a quirk he had taken, he could project the footage into his mind. The doctor had given Tamura a failed subject to disintegrate, and he had also disintegrated the floor under the subject and had fallen through. He internally sighed, summoning the black goo of the quirk he had taken in order to bring Tamura to him. As the boy appeared before him, on his knees and coughing out what had gotten in his mouth, All for One held out his arm, intending for Tamura to grab the syringe and take some of his BLD, so he could heal. A damaged product was not worth much to him. Yet Tamura was his trump card against All Might. After all, how could he kill the only living relative, the grandson, of his dear mentor, Nana Shimura? It was a good thing he had taken the quirk from that Lucille girl after she had been turned into a Nomu, though it did little for his own healing. It was useful to have for the brat. Inko gathered her things, stacked the papers neatly, and put them inside a folder, then put her stuff inside her suitcase as she packed up her work area. She had gotten an SCRT, so she could go to her firm to confer in person with her defendant's legal team on how to proceed from their end. She had brought with her the witness statements, her client's hospital records, and her client's statements. They needed to go over everything and gather the necessary evidence to further their argument in order to proceed with the lawsuit. Since this is against a hero, it would need hard evidence to convict. Inko quietly thought to herself about how corrupt the hero system really was, as the rise of heroes also brought forth the rise of villains. The death rates had gone up in the last 20 years since the Hero Commission had changed heads, and the amount of civilian casualties had increased as well. The worst being Endeavor, with All Might's earlier years being a close second. He had eventually gotten more control of his quirk in order to minimize the damage it would do, as with his strength anyone could get hurt if his control slips even a little. She commended his efforts. He truly deserved number one in her eyes. She grabbed her purse and put it over her shoulder, then grabbed her suitcase and her to-go coffee, then headed to the door of her office in order to leave. Her hero SCRT, Cementos, who had volunteered as he wasn't needed at school, it being Saturday and all. "Ms. Midoriya, the boss has requested your presence." Yuki-san, the new intern, called out to her. She sighed, taking a sip of her coffee as she turned around and headed for her boss's office. Quietly, she wondered what this was about. Maybe something dealing with her case against Flamebird. Thank you for joining us on this journey through What If Genius Deku Had System Quirk with Rewards and Punishments. We hope you found it as captivating as we did. A big thank you to lollyme for creating such an engaging story. Don't forget to visit their profile on fanfiction.net for more fantastic works. The link is in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Zen and Fanfics for more intriguing explorations into fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we love hearing your thoughts and suggestions in the comments section. See you soon in the next video.